She's an award-winning writer, a hunting guide, archery and rifle instructor, keynote speaker, and all-around outdoors woman who encourages you to get outside, hunt, fish, shoot, and savor all that life has to offer. And now, here's your host, Lea and I.
Well, hey, hi, hello. Welcome back to the Mac Outdoors podcast. If you've been here before, I'm so happy that you have returned. And if it's your first time, then welcome to the show. I hope that you enjoy today's episode and that you learn a little something. Before I get going, I wanted to let you know that I will be adding some episodes into the schedule. I have been publishing on a weekly basis, and quite honestly, I've got so many interviews in the backlog that I feel like I need to start doing a little bit more. So I will be doing 1 to 2 episodes a week. We'll continue with the every Wednesday episode, and then I'll try to get one up sometime on the weekend for you to listen to, because some of this is timely information. And honestly, today's episode is an interview that I actually reference in an upcoming episode. And when I told them in the episode, I said, I have this other interview. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, wow, and I haven't published it yet because I've got this backlog. So I will be doing twice a week episodes for quite a while until we can get caught up and get more in line with a reasonable schedule of publishing these wonderful interviews that I have for you. And I also wanted to let you know before we get going that anything that we talk about, if I can have links to that, I will throw them in the show notes or on the website at miaandstein.com. Additionally, you will find bonus content over there through the membership site where you can find some of the raw and uncut episodes. And also, there is a book club over there. We are currently reading the book called The Gift of Fear. It's one that I have given away many times as a gift. The gift of fear is a great gift to give to others, and it's something that if you would like to join the book club, it's totally free, and it's something that I just began this year, but go ahead and sign up over there, and I'll be sending out some emails so that we can visit and talk about what we learned from that book. And also, if you would like to send some shout outs, I do reference Facebook again because I still don't have access to my Facebook account, and I may just not regain access to that. I don't know. I'm at the point where I'm fine without it. It's been quite nice to not have it to worry about. Anyways, you can reach out to the show at Mac Outdoors on Instagram and sort of on Facebook, and you can find Lea and Stein on almost all the social media outlets. And if you will shoot me a direct message, I will get back to you, or the best way to do it is to email me, and the email address is contact@miaandstein.com. I am about to send you off to listen to this great episode that I think is just a great one. It's a wonderful interview. It's fun to have this young lady on the show. She has been here in the past. That's a little hint. But as we get going, I hope you will learn something, and I hope that you might consider subscribing because, as I mentioned, there is another episode in the future that will reference this one, so there may be some correlation. If you do enjoy my podcast, I do hope that you would share that with friends, family members, or others that you think could stand to learn something from the Mac Outdoors podcast. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you again for tuning in.
This winter, stay warm from head to toe with WSI Sports' heater gear layers. Use Lea's affiliate code LLCO10 at WSISports.com and get 10% off your order. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI Sports is bringing back pride in American-made clothing. That code once again, LLCO10 for 10% off at WSISports.com.
Well, everybody, today I have an extra special guest on the podcast, and this is actually the person that was the reason we started the podcast. And for longtime listeners, you will immediately know who I'm talking about. But for those of you who are new, we originally started the Mac Outdoors podcast. It was called the Mac Outdoors with Mia and Lea podcast. And so today my daughter Lea is joining us.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be back on.
I have to twist her arm, and she's probably a little sore because it's hard to get her around here. But actually, today I asked her to come and visit me because I was at the National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucuses down in, or up in Bozeman. I guess it's down. It's lower elevation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so down in Bozeman. It's north, but it's lower. While we were at the caucus, we had a group that presented about wild horses or feral horses or free roaming horses. And I know that Lea, when she was in college, studied the wild horses, and she also did something else, but we're not going to get to that yet. But so to catch everyone up that may be newer listening to the podcast, Lea, I want to tell them a little bit about you're going away to college, because that's what initiated the podcast. So let them know about your whole dynamic and situation there.
Yes. It's been a while. I went to the University of Montana back in 2017, which is crazy to think. Now I'm graduated with my degree and doing all the fun things. But while I was in Montana, I studied journalism, specifically photojournalism. But one of the stories I featured was about the wild, free-range, feral horses. And so it was a lot of fun to learn about it, and through all of that, I became a rodeo photographer. I travel the country right now, going to rodeos, cuttings, reinings, any equestrian event that hires me, and I travel with an awesome group of people and do a lot of fun things with horses, and I get to learn a lot, see a lot, and that's why I'm here.
She's home today. That's why I get to have her on the show, because she does travel a lot, and I had asked her to be on a while back, but she's been on the road, and today I have her in my grasp.
Yes.
But partly when she was at school, she's been a photographer since she was like 7 years old, and people laugh when I say that, but I actually have photos that she took when she was 7 of Hank and I fly fishing, and they were amazing pictures, especially for a 7-year-old. So she's been a photographer for a long time, but while she was in college, she went and took pictures of dude ranches.
Yeah, I went to a lot of dude ranches and just some actual cattle ranches that had a couple hundred head, a lot of Angus. It was part of my photo projects, but it was a lot of fun. It was a whole new culture up there for sure, and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, part of the school assignments and so forth. But also, while she was up there, she adopted. What did you adopt?
I adopted, while we were headed home, I decided that I was ready to get back involved with horses, and after my accident, which you can hear about on a different episode.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
After all of that, I decided I was ready to get back out there with the horses, and I adopted a Mustang.
Yeah, so we have, I think at the time we had like 27 horses and mules at our place. And then we get this picture and a message that she had adopted a Mustang. So you can imagine that mom and dad were shaking their heads going, what in the world? But anyways, that's partly why I have Lea on the show today, is because she did adopt a Mustang, and I wanted to learn about the process, why you adopted the Mustang, and then how you even found the Mustang to adopt, and the whole story. So that's what I want you to share with not just my audience, but with me today, is the whole story about it.
Yeah, so it's an interesting process going through adopting horses. It's similar, actually, if any of you have tried to adopt a dog lately. there's a process. They have a lot of criteria, and that depends who you're adopting from. Really, my horse was not a BLM horse. She was from the Yakima Reservation up in Washington and was rescued by a separate organization that then took in about 10 head of wild horses, and they work with them. They kind of start halter breaking them, and as time goes on, they post them on certain websites, on their personal websites, and I actually found this company or rescue on Facebook, looking through Montana horse rescues and stuff like that, and that's how I found them. It was an interesting process to find them online. They were actually 3 hours away from where we were, so we couldn't just take a short drive down and go check her out. I was excited to find a horse, and they were like, she's halter broke, she's good to go, you're gonna love her. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm excited, pumped. We drove out there, and she had only had a halter put on. She was never actually worked with. So that was kind of an exciting thing. When we got there, they had to have a discussion with us about our facilities. When you adopt a Mustang, no matter who it's with, you have certain requirements for your property. You have to not have them in a barbed wire fenced area. They can hurt themselves. You have to have a man-made shelter. Trees are not shelter according to rescues, which is interesting because they don't have man-made shelters out in the wild. So that one's kind of a head scratcher. You're not allowed to use them for certain events. This is why I ended up getting so interested and involved learning about the wild horses. You are not allowed to use any wild horse for any rodeo event. They are not allowed to be bucking horses. Stock contractors are not allowed to own a wild horse. You can't use wild horses as an outfitter. They made that a rule that you can't use them for certain things like that, which is tough because I think those horses do really well when they have a job.
Yeah.
Just as many of the horses we have, they want to have a job and they want to work. And a lot of the rescues, they sit in pens and deteriorate and do worse than they were out on the range. But that's also how they're managing the populations right now, is we'll bring them in and that's how it's going to go. And so when I picked up Pixels, her name, I was shocked that her pictures were much different than how she looked in person. She was very thin and she was very crazy. She was running around the pen with this halter on, head high. And I thought, oh boy, we're already here. We just drove 3 hours. And am I really going to say no now that we drove all this way? And we were good to go with the place we were keeping her at the time. And so we attempted to load her.
Yeah. Before you talk about how you loaded her, for the listeners, I mean, I know a lot of the terms you're talking about, but you had talked about they told you she was halter broke.
Yes.
What does that mean to me and you?
Yes. So halter broke, to a normal horse person, that would mean that they can lead. They're broke to lead.
For the love of the outdoors, open spaces, and mountains, shop www.mia.limited/1. The Mac Outdoors Mountains Are Calling series of apparel is perfect for you or your loved ones. Support the channel and shop now. www.mia.limited/1.
That means that they've just spent the time putting the halter on and off and giving them that pressure that a halter gives a horse. That way they move forward. A lot of the times with these horses, they say halter broke, which means we got a halter on them, and that is it. And so to me, that's not really halter broke. That was, well, we got it on there and good luck.
So it basically is like if you have a puppy and the first time you put a collar on the puppy, they start kind of jumping around and trying to get this off. That's basically what you had, was a horse that you could put the halter on, but once you get that puppy going, you can actually teach them to walk around and, when to heel, when to run, that kind of stuff. And so basically in correlation, that's what halter broke would have been, is she would have known how to lead and respect your space and not pull back and different things like that. So
yes.
And I just wanted to kind of fill that in for any of the listeners that maybe didn't know what that meant before you start talking about how are you going to load it. And here we go again, puppy demonstration. Like, how are you going to load this puppy that's trying to basically get loose from this thing that's wrapped around its neck? So anyways, you can tell us about loading up your Mustang.
Yeah, so she was a little wild, completely wild, really. She'd been there about a week from the facility, so she wasn't around people. They gather horses with helicopters a lot of the time, so that's stressful enough on those horses, but that still means that they're not getting that human contact. So them trailering, they ran them all in and loaded them, and unfortunately that's what we had to do. She was just so crazy and we couldn't catch her again, and so we ran her in and she rode the whole way, thankfully. And I was like, this is a whole new adventure we're about to embark on, and not really one that I was expecting to have. And so it's been quite the ride. She was 2 when I picked her up. She was just a little baby. She was about 13, 14 hands maybe, probably closer to 13. So she was a lot smaller than I was expecting. She was thin, so she needed a lot of feed and time to herself to hopefully build back that muscle and weight gain. And that's how a lot of the horses looked. That's how they look even if you're going to see a wild horse herd. They're not big and beautiful like a lot of the photos you see are. A lot of the horses that I've come in contact with and seen from Arizona to Colorado, they're thin. They're not healthy. They're not something beautiful to look at. It makes you pretty sad, actually.
Yeah. And so when you decided you were going to get the Mustang, did you find that through the research projects you were doing for classwork, or what came first? The research on the wild horses, or did the wild horse, the Mustang? How did that work?
That program I found through my research for my project I was working on. And that was actually, the project was about a year and a half probably before I found Pixel and decided to adopt her. So I found the program through there. I had done research and it was pretty easy to find resources and rescues. There's a lot of them. Even no matter where you look, there's plenty of rescues that have plenty of horses waiting. So if anyone is looking, there's a lot of resources out there.
Yeah. And when you decided you were going to adopt a Mustang, what did you think you were going to do? What was your goal, or how did you envision? You obviously envisioned a different type of horse than what you got.
Yes.
So what was your goal with the horse?
So if many of you have seen my mom's photos, we have a couple horses on the ranch that are res horses. But they have been broke to ride, and they're amazing horses. And
by saying that, what she means is we have several that came from the Navajo reservation that basically were just free roaming horses that they catch and they break them and then they bring them and we buy them at the sale barn.
Yeah, and that is pretty much what I was kind of expecting or looking for. Not something that was already ready to go, but something I can learn with and work with a little bit. That's not what I got with this horse. She, for one, being a mare, if anyone doesn't know, mares tend to be a little more stubborn than the boys, they're either really good or they are really moody. I'd like to say. So that is what she is. And I've had other mares in the past that were amazing. You're not going to find another horse like her, but this horse, she is something else.
Yeah. And basically, I mean, she is a wild horse, and that's in her genes, I think, because I've worked with Pixel a little bit too, and she's a sweetheart.
Yes.
But she is a wild horse. And so once you got her home, your goal was to kind of work with her. Tell us a little bit about the process of training her and getting her used to humans.
Yeah, she definitely didn't know what. And anyone that is thinking of rescuing or feels bad for these horses and wants to adopt, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I don't think a lot of people think about it, and they just feel bad for them and want to help them, but it's a lot of work. And these horses, you have to build a bond with them, and sometimes you can't always do that. Pixel, I did build a bond with her. She is super sweet, and when I got her home in Montana, we spent the week just leading her around, getting her used to us. We would go sit out there for hours. We'd eat dinner out there with her. We would just let her know that we're here, and we luckily had 2 other horses to put her with, so she kind of got a friend to bond with, and that's what those horses want. They want the herd, they want friends, and isolating them is not always the best choice.
Right, and I would say that's true with all horses.
Yes.
You'll notice if you see a single horse in a pasture, there will always be pacing marks. They'll end up cribbing, which is chewing on posts or fences, and they'll end up with some nervous traits because they are herd animals. They would need friends.
Yes, and that's why if you go to certain events, even a lot of people travel or just have mini donkeys with them. They have goats with them. They need companions. And so if you aren't able to give them that, sometimes that's not always the best choice and can get you hurt, honestly. But with Pixel, having that partner, it actually was good because he was so close with us that she trusted what he trusted. And we spent the whole afternoons, evenings, we would load her and unload her in the trailer. The loud noises of the trailer rattling, us walking in there with another horse, just getting her a little understanding of the noises, that it's okay. And she did really well. From after that week, we headed for Colorado, and now even after, she's going 5 now. So she's been down here for 4 years now. We still have her. And she's a wild horse. So the biggest thing, I think, if anyone's trying to break one or being around them, is they're going to be skittish. That's her biggest thing that I've noticed, is she is scared. If you come up on her too fast, if you move your hand wrong, if you're in the mountains and something's not right, she's a little sketchy.
Yeah, even if she is with confident horses, that's what I've noticed, because we have a lot of what I call bomber horses that aren't afraid of anything.
Yes.
And she'll even be with them, and if something is wrong, she definitely will jump or, jump sideways or something like that. So we always have to be aware when we're around her to have slow movements and that kind of thing, which some people don't understand that it legitimately means slow movements, not So also you talked about these animals needing a job, and really a lot of animals like to have a job. Even a lot of dogs, they like to have a job and have a purpose. Heck, humans like to have a purpose. Something that I noticed and that I love and I admire about Pixel a lot is she helped me when we were on our hunting trip. And what we've done is, in trying to get her ready to ride, which Lea, her boyfriend, has been on Pixel a couple times and that kind of thing. But we also would put pack saddles on her, and that way she could get used to the weight. And then she helped me on my hunting trip, and she carried gear and actually very light panniers just to go. And it was amazing to me. I have a picture of her that I always just love to look at, because she loves to see what's on the other side of the mountain, and she just loves to go. And that's like the most calm that I see her, is when she's with us, like leading her behind my horse to carry gear. She just seems like she embraces that a lot. And it's kind of cute to watch her, because my horse is almost 17 hands and she's like 14 now.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah.
She's so little, but she, being also a Mustang, she has such great footing on the mountain, and she does so well up there. It's really cool. So I just love to watch her work. And is that something that we're allowed to do with the Mustang? Because I heard you say outfitters can't use her, and I wasn't outfitting, so is it okay?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's not anything against packing them as far as I've seen. You can do trail rides with them and all of that. We're pretty smart about packing, I think. We're not going to overpack her. We're not going to put her in a situation that's going to cause any injuries or anything like that. She turns into a completely different horse when she's on the trail. She hasn't been ridden on the trail, but you put the saddle on her and get her on that mountain at the trail, and she's completely calm, like you said, and she likes it. I mean, she even packed my bull elk out.
Yeah, that's right.
And she was perfectly fine. She handled the rock like a champ and got us back to the truck, and I think it's pretty cool. She still gets a little nervous putting the animals on her, I think, but she's still learning. She's still young enough that she's learning all the time, and it's kind of exciting. She makes me want to bang my head every now and then, but but for the most part, it's cool to watch her develop a little more and kind of not be that scared little Mustang. And I'm sure we'll share some pictures before and after of her. She's chunky and proud now, and she works hard.
If I ever gain access back to my Facebook account, I'll put them on Facebook. If not, you'll have to look on Instagram for some pictures. Do you think, I know that it's been a work in progress with riding her, do you think that would ever be something for short rides or anything like that? Or are you just looking at her as an assistant or a helper with your other horse?
It's hard to say. I think we sent her to a trainer about a few months ago, actually, and she did really well, but she still has her issues. She gets nervous, and she did have a little episode or two, and for what I'm looking for, I don't want a horse that I know is not gonna hurt me in any way, and we may just do some short things and see how it goes a little bit. Her very first ride was the week we were down in Colorado, like the first week we moved back, where we threw a saddle on her just to see, and she did great. You would have thought she had 30 days on her already, training and used to the saddle. She didn't care one bit, and so we were pretty hopeful for that. And maybe in the future, the more we work with her, we can do some little trail rides, stuff like that, but we'll see. We haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, and that's a challenge for you all if you're newer listeners. I was trying to remember, did we do an episode about your back being injured?
No,
Yeah.
I don't think we did.
Yeah, because I said I would link that in the show notes, but I'm not sure that we ever did an episode about Leah's back injury. I will have to go back and look in the archives. But Lea injured her back, and so this is where it's kind of a challenge for her in training this Mustang. She has to have other people get on her, because literally if Lea gets bucked off or if she's jarred wrong, she could be paralyzed. So this is a challenge with working with this horse and with all the horses, really. You know, she has to be very careful. And So that's a little backstory about the training that goes on. A lot of the riding has to be done. Like she said, she sent her to a trainer, and then her boyfriend has ridden Pixel as well. But we don't want Lea to get on Pixel and get hurt.
Yeah, and that's my biggest fear with her, is that if something does happen, the hard thing with them is you never know what they're going to do. Some horses may just crow hop, which means kind of bounce around a little, and some might try to sunfish, belly up kind of thing, and try to make sure you don't ever get on a horse again. And that's not a risk I'm willing to take with a horse at all.
Yeah, and so for you guys listening, what a sunfish is basically they jump and twist sideways, and literally a lot of these horses end up falling flat on their sides. They're just trying to do whatever they can to get you off of them at some point. And so then you'll see like what a traditional rodeo bucking horse is, where their front feet go down and their back feet are kicked out. And so different horses do different things. My big bay roan, he hasn't done it to me, but he can get it on. He can buck. But whereas Cowboy, the red dun that I share a lot of pictures of, he crow hops, and it's been forever since he's even attempted that with me. But he's not really serious about it. He used to do that when he'd feel lightning or thunder coming. He was afraid of it and just was like, "Let's get home." And if you weren't going to let him go home, he'd get upset. But he hasn't done that in a long time. He's an old senior citizen now. So.
Yeah, you probably can't anymore.
But he's old reliable. Well, do you have any tips? You said if people wanted to adopt, they could just go search. Do you have any other tips or suggestions, or like why are there so many horses up for adoption?
There's so many horses. They're everywhere you go out here in the West. I mean, they're a huge problem in Arizona and Nevada, and really in Colorado there's word about it, but I wouldn't say as much as those other two states. In Arizona, I've been traveling there a lot lately, so I've done a lot of research learning about their herds, and a lot of those horses are turned out. They're not wild. They're people's horses that they go bankrupt, they can't afford feed, and so they turn them out and with the wild horses and let them roam. And if anyone's ever seen Arizona, been there, lived there, there's not green pastures for miles and miles. Those horses are living off the cactus there. They don't have the feed there. They don't even have the water sources, as a lot of the conservation projects that we hear about, they're building water resources for the wild animals, the elk and deer, and those horses are taking over. And there's a lot of management that needs to go on. And the hardest thing, as we're seeing with any legislative matters dealing with wildlife, animals in general, is the emotion. There's an emotional connection to horses, and they're not viewed the same as an elk or a deer or a javelina. They're a heart animal. They're like a dog, and they don't want to deal with them until it's too late. And that's the sad part, is I love the pictures of wild horses. I love seeing them out there. I've been out there. The ones in Arizona, you can walk right up to them. And to me, that's not a wild horse. And that bums me out to see those horses out there that people are feeding them, that they're feral. They're not wild. They're not the genetics of the wild horses that we've had in America from years and years and years ago. Those are the horses that people couldn't take care of, and it's sad that someone else couldn't take them in or take care of them better.
Yeah, and that's something that I think for the listeners, if you have a horse or if you're considering getting a horse, a big thing is a lot of people want horses and they don't realize, like Lea said, the time and the expense that goes into just a regular horse. And that's what she's talking about, is somebody bought a quarter horse, they couldn't afford it, they're just turning it out outside of the pasture, outside of the fence.
Right.
And it's supposed to survive on its own. And if you can't afford to do that, what you can do, and this is looked at negatively, and I think the attitude needs to change, is go to the local sale barn and put it up for sale, and somebody will buy that, and you might get lucky and get somebody like Lea that's going to be willing to take care of and feed and train and take the time for the horse. Instead, you're just turning them out into a pasture where nobody's there to take care of them. They literally are starving to death. And that's something that's kind of curious to me, is there's not a lot of pictures because it's not beautiful.
Right.
You don't see a lot of pictures of these starving horses and the torn up landscape and all of that's in some of the areas. And as she said, Arizona and Nevada, I think, are the greatest impact areas. But rather than doing that, if you could just take the time to go and find somebody to buy that horse.
Yeah, and one big thing that we haven't talked about yet is how you're saying if you're turning out your quarter horse out there is no penalty for doing that. But for someone who's adopted a Mustang, you can actually get in trouble. So BLM horses are tattooed. So if one is captured again with that same number that you had, it traces straight back to you, and you can get a hefty fine for turning a Mustang back out. For me, if I'm even considering selling, rehoming, Pixel my Mustang, that I would first have to call the adoption agency I adopted her from, and then they can either take her back or they can find another person to adopt her. But you have to find a certified person that meets all their qualifications that they require for a Mustang. And that's the crazy part to me, is with a horse that you're buying a quarter horse, there's no regulation, fences you need, feed you need, shelter. But for these Mustangs, there's some really unrealistic expectations. And I think that's what's hard for them to rehome these Mustangs that they've rescued off the range, is now they don't have anywhere to go because they have all of these insane expectations and requirements for people to meet that they can't go to rodeos. And those bucking horses that these contractors have are treated probably better than most horses that people have as riding horses. Those horses, they calculated on some pro rodeo horses that they work a total of 2 minutes a year. And they get fed grain and they get free range hay and pastures. But Mustangs can't do that because they're considering it abuse. And those horses live an amazing life. And that is it's upsetting. And same with outfitters. Those outfitters give horses a purpose and a job. And as you know, our horses, they live for that. We literally have mules that will load themselves on the trailer wanting to go. You can't tell me that is abuse, that they don't love what they do. They want to go. And those horses have to sit in pens. And that's not to guilt trip anyone to getting those horses, but I think there's a reality of people that don't realize the world of that Western lifestyle, of the world of horses. People aren't educated, even if you're reading it on a website. Being there and being a part of it is completely different. And experiencing that, the people who are making those rules obviously have never experienced that. And you can see how sad a horse is at your local stable compared to the one out in the field. Those
absolutely. So Leah's very first horse was named Ruger, and Lea was taking riding lessons, and Ruger, he had to be stalled at the stables, at the barns where she was taking riding lessons. And it makes me sad just thinking about, like, I just got the chills thinking about it, because every time he would see us drive up when she was coming to lessons, he would cry and cry and cry, because he was like, please just get me out of here, because he didn't want to be penned. He wanted to be out in the pasture with all his buddies, and there were other horses penned there, so he wasn't alone. But there's a difference. So, And I know some people, they can't afford places that have large pastures and stuff like that. But it definitely, for a free-range horse to go into a little pen like that, that's got to be brutal.
Yes, and that's what those wild horses, I think, manage them properly and learn the land. I mean, we regulate cattle on the land. It should be the same way with those horses. And unfortunately, the sad fact is everything dies, but would you rather see one die and rot away or be utilized in some way? And I know a lot of people are big into rescuing them off the kill truck and that's a sad reality also, and that's something that people don't want to talk about, but they're being utilized, and that's a sad thing to think about. But
did you send me the article recently? Somebody sent me an article about the people that are going to the sale barns and buying the horses and turning them loose.
Yes, that's super common. And actually in Colorado, a rescue just purchased roughly 1,000 acres, and they're going to the local sale barns and buying up all those horses and turning them out on that land. And what they're basically playing right into what those horses were just free range, and they're creating they're not following the model of the ecosystem. They're going to create over carry capacity. Those horses are going to play the same game on there, and then what do they do with them? You never hear what the rescues do with these horses.
Yeah, that's something next time I'm driving by, maybe I always say that I want to stop and visit, but one of these times I will have to stop and visit with them and ask them, because there's one here in central Colorado that has recently, a nice ranch was purchased, and that's what they're doing there. And already you can see they have too many horses. The feed is diminishing. It's not enough to sustain, which we deal with that a lot, because with the number of horses we have to find them land to go graze, and we grow hay, and we have to do all that. And now we have 21 horses and mules, and just with them, it's a challenge. So it'd be interesting to know what these, and I think some of them call themselves Mustang ranches, and they're really feral horse ranches.
Right. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing, is there's a big difference between a feral horse and a Mustang. And if you look at the genetics, a lot of the paints aren't usually Mustangs. And that's kind of what's always been the typical picture of a Mustang, is this paint horse, and that's not always the case. A lot of the bloodlines, those are feral. Those are not wild horses. And same with roans. Roans are not feral or wild horses. And so next time you're on your drive and see some horses in the wild horse areas, it makes you think. And it's always good. It's fun to learn about them when you're traveling. That's how I kind of started in it. And my mom and I have been on a wild horse chase through the high desert of Colorado, and it was cool to see. And they had little colts with them, little babies, but when you go to those areas, there is a lot of information about them, and just read about them and learn about them and see how your legislators are handling your...
Yeah, and that's a big thing, is visit with the legislators, because that's part of the issue with all these horses that are free roaming, is there is not a great way to manage them, and there isn't funding to manage them. They try to sterilize a lot of the females, and that way they can limit the number of new births. But there's not a good way to fund that. And, we have different bills and different funding mechanisms, but there's not one that specifically goes to the horses. So it's something that it's getting so out of control in a lot of areas. It's something that really needs to be considered and thought about. And also, we need to figure out how to reduce the numbers, not necessarily how to relocate them, because I have friends in certain organizations that they're all about, we're going to move the ones from California to Colorado. Well, okay, you're going to bring your problem to us?
Yes.
Is what I see that as, whereas we need to figure out how to manage them where they live and also educate others to not just dump them out onto the habitat, because that's not helping.
Exactly.
So, well, thank you for sharing your story about Pixel, because it's one, I basically knew the story, but I didn't ever ask you for the details. And I figured if I was going to ask you, I may as well ask you and help my listeners learn about him.
Of course. I love talking about him and love sharing Pixel's journey. She's come a long way, and she's a pain in the butt sometimes, but just being the only girl in the herd, she can cause some problems.
Yeah, the boys are all about Pixel, which is a headache sometimes. But she also does come up. She's the first one to come up when you go out in the pasture. She's very friendly now. Although one wrong move and away she goes.
Yeah, so she's a character, and I enjoy her being around. And
yeah. So for my listeners, thank you for being on the show again, since it used to just be your show. But thank you for coming. And will you let them know where they can follow you and your work? And I think you have some pictures on your social media that they could look at of her.
Yeah. So for my photography, I shoot a lot of wild horses. If you want to see those, my Instagram is Legit Outdoors Photog. And my Facebook page is Legit Outdoors. And for my personal stuff, seeing us pack in the mountains and all our fun adventures, you can follow me at Instagram at Lea_Huntress and Facebook at Lea Leggett.
Very cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a great one. Talk to you next time.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.